Hi, my name is Maria Early, and today I will be doing a presentation on John McCain as a character-driven leader. He was very well known for in his time in politics and in the Senate, as well as the military, for being a maverick. He was willing to break party lines and work with people from various backgrounds. So we'll be going over his leadership and ethics. He had a lot of personal values that he held very dear to him. Honor was a big one. He came from a military family. His dad and his grandfather served in the Navy, and he followed suit, finding honor in carrying on his family's legacy and tradition and serving that greater purpose in life. He always aspired to be worthy of the roles that he held. Courage was something that he exemplified when he was taken prisoner and spent 5 years as a prisoner of war in Vietnam. As well as later in Senate, he was able to cross party lines, even though that would cost him a great deal of respect, sometimes from his own party or support. He wasn't afraid to reach out and speak with those no one else was willing to. Integrity he kept very dear to his heart. He realized that even though he served in the war and was proud of his fellow soldiers, he was cognizant of the disillusionment surrounding the Vietnam War and how the US government said they were closer to winning it than they actually were. So he didn't think that it was led with integrity. And so he strived to embody that in his own leadership, especially through a policy of straight talk. He liked sharing the facts and exactly what he thought with his constituency and not trying to bluff them over or be too vague in order to gain more support. Now, he also was a big champion of being accountable for the things that he failed in. He was human, no one is perfect, but leaders are able to deal with their imperfections and continually strive to improve themselves. And he was known for being very self-critical about some public failings. For example, when he was campaigning to get support from the Republican Party, he avoided addressing the Confederate flag directly because a large number of the Republicans' constituency supports the Confederate flag. And later he said that he regretted not being more clear about his condemnation for the Confederate flag's use. And he said that he would rather have been employed that policy of having straight talk in order to be transparent. Um, and also the reasons why he does things. For example, he campaigned to get rid of a special parking spot for working congressmen in Washington, D.C. at one of the memorials. And he said that at the time he had done it more because he was a rebel and like sticking it to the man and making other people upset. But he realized later that even though it resulted in something that was known to be a good thing, he needs to be doing things for the right reasons. And all of these lessons that he learned, he liked being accountable for them to the public and sharing what he learned to better his leadership as he got older. He had a very strong sense of duty and responsibility to his family. Even when he was a prominent politician, he was known to have a very close relationship with all of his children, and he strived to be the leader for his soldiers once he gained command posts that he wished he had had as a new soldier, as well as duty to his country and to serve when he was no longer able to serve in a military capacity. He also had a very unique value of being a realistic optimist. He always had hope for the future of the United States and wanted to realistically address ways to get there. A lot of these values overlapped with organizational and national values, again, that service to country through the military service. But then as he progressed through life, how his methods of service changed, but not his drive to serve. Beginning then in a political sense after he got done with his military career, and then moving on to hopefully campaign for a presidential chair. Democracy was a strong value. Again, he served in the Vietnam War, so he had a very strong identification with anti-communist ideas, and he recognized that a lot of the freedoms he enjoyed as an American, he wanted to preserve for those his fellow Americans as well as for other people overseas and preserve democracy's influence internationally. And he also recognized important to democracy is dissent. So the next value of unity through division was, even though he was a Republican, he was a big champion of nonpartisanship and addressed things individually by their issue instead of just voting with the rest of his party. And that was something he called out a lot of politicians for during his time in the Senate. And finally, sacrifice. Everything that he did in life took something out of him. He sacrificed a lot of time and health when he was a prisoner of war. He could have been released early because of his dad's role as commander of the Pacific Fleet, but instead he said that he wanted to be released in the same method, in the same manner and timing as the rest of the prisoners of war and be treated no differently than them. He lost a lot of respect from his party when he started speaking out against Trump's very extremist rhetoric and policies. And he continued to serve and sacrifice even some of his health and some of his lifetime when he stayed in Washington, D.C., even when diagnosed with cancer, and continued to serve for as long as he could. He built trust as a leader in a variety of ways. Again, that personal cost that I just talked about, that when people realized the cost that he was placed on him in order to build that trust, it got him a lot of respect, and they started to trust him to make decisions. He also built trust by talking and practicing transparency regarding political stances and government functions. He would not just say, I'm a Republican, look at our platform. He was transparent about where he actually stood on issues. And he also advocated for more transparency in government broader. He was a big proponent of campaign finance reform, for example, something that not a lot of people in power want to change because it benefits them, but he recognized the responsibility he had to be transparent with the people who voted him into office. He was also known to be a bit hot-tempered, and this helped him build trust with people because they want to see their leaders emotional about the things that matter, and they want to see them upset enough to advocate change. However, this also highlighted the idea that being angry is not the same as losing control in anger. He had a style of leading in front, so if he wanted something from people, he would be the first one to do it. When he wanted to work with the Democrats and have other people cross the aisle to work with the Republicans, he would start the initial conversation, no matter how difficult it would be. And he prioritized having something productive come out of that partnership instead of standing on your own pedestal and remaining stubborn. He called a lot of people out for that during his time in office. A lot of these successes I've already mentioned, but again, he had a presidential campaign. He ran against President Obama in 2008, and I think one of his biggest successes was being proud of his opponent, and for the historic moment it was for the U.S. to have their first African American president. He had a lot of respect for President Obama and his style as a leader, even if he differed from him on some particular political issues. And he exemplified leadership in how he accepted his loss. He also defended releasing the Senate's report on torture in 2014. He believed that the greatest threat to the United States was extremist terrorism, and yet he was still willing to hold his own government accountable for their actions after 9/11 in gaining intelligence overseas about terrorism. So that was a controversial release report, but he was an ethical leader when he wanted to get it released and given to the public. He also led when he spoke out against dangerous nationalism and populism trends. Again, he time and time again called out people from his own party, as well as those across the aisle, for capitalizing on things that were dangerous to democracy and to the country. One major thing he was known for was voting against the Obamacare Repeal Act when he had the chance to, because of his issues about the integrity of the process in Congress to get it to that vote. And he didn't think that it was fair or representative of the actual country's wishes at that moment. And even though he was a prisoner of war for 5 years in Vietnam, he encouraged normalization of relations with Vietnam. He traveled there afterwards again and put his own personal experiences behind him as he reached out to build a better future for people around the world, Americans and those in Vietnam. And he was a very prominent member of the Gang of Eight in Senate, a group of Democrats and Republicans who started having a lot of tough conversations on issues like immigration reform in order to be productive. These are some quotes for him. I think the last one is the most important. It says, "Glory belongs to the act of being constant to something greater than yourself, to a cause, to your principles, and to the people on whom you rely and who rely on you." This encapsulates his leadership. I don't have time to go through the rest of them, but these are some quotes that I think really show his character. And here are some sources that I used to prepare for this presentation. Thank you for listening.